Yesterday we went through the I-door thought process. So with that thought process, we just saw the visible object in the man. At this moment of I-door thought process, we do not see the man yet. So what we see with this thought process is the material particles that are visible to the eye. Now there are 28 material properties and only one of them is visible to the eye. So the other 27 we understand with our mind. So when we see a man, we first see the visible object or the material particles that can be seen in the person we call man. And this thought process arises through the I-door. So this is called I-door thought process. And this I-door thought process takes the present visible object as object. Now we see a man and we see the visible object in that man, and so with this thought process we see the visible object that belongs to the present time, not to past and not to future. But this I-door thought process alone is not enough to enable us to see a man or to say that I see a man. Other thought processes must follow this I-door thought process. That means, as you know, the visible object is material property, and so it has lifespan of 17 thought moments. So when the 17 thought moments are full, with the second moment of registration, this present visible object disappears. When it disappears, this thought process also stops. And then there are many moments of bhavanga before another thought process takes place. And that thought process which follows this I-door thought process arises through mind-door. And it takes the past object as object. Now, when we come to that second thought process, the visible object we saw is already past. So we take that past visible object as object with that thought process that arises through mind-door. So we see the visible object in the man with our eyes, and then we recall the visible object that has now become past with another type of thought process. And that thought process is called taking the past object. Taking the past object as object. Whether it is present or it is past, the visible object is an ultimate reality. Since it is one of the 28 material properties, it is the ultimate reality. So first we see the present object with the I or I-door thought process, and then we recall the past visible object with the second thought process that follow here that follow the I door thought process. And that thought process, second thought process, arises through mind door. So we take the past object in our mind or through the mind door. That is still not enough. We have not seen the man yet. So after the cessation of the second type of thought process, there arises another type of thought process. And that process takes the group of visible objects as object, or the combination of the visible objects as object. And that thought process is called taking the group. Although we say it takes the group of visible objects, the visible object still is an ultimate reality. We are not taking the concept as object with this third thought process. So the third thought process is the process that takes the combination or the group of visible material properties or visible object as object. After the third thought process, there follows another thought process, the fourth one. And with that fourth one, we take or we see the thing concept. Now, I hope you remember two kinds of concepts, thing concept and name concept. So name concept means the name of the things or the nouns or the words that denote the things. And thing concept is what is denoted by the name or by the words. The man, the person which we call man, is the thing concept, and the name man is name concept. So with this fourth thought process, we take the thing concept as object. That means with the fourth thought process, we see the man. Now we see the man. Now we see the man as having shape and form. So when we see the shape and form as a man, we are taking a concept as object. We no longer take the ultimate reality as object during the fourth thought process. After taking the thing concept, after seeing the shape or form of the man, we say or we know that this is a man. So with the fifth thought process, we take the name concept of that object. So only then do we really see a man and say that I see a man. So in order for us to see a man or a thing, we need 5 types of thought processes, and each process may repeat many times. Now, we are seeing every day, and seeing seems to be very simple experience. But when we know Abhidhamma and when we follow this series of thought processes, we know that seeing is a very complex experience. We need thousands of thought moments to really see a man or a woman and so on. Only after going through these 5 thought processes do we see a man or do we name the thing we see. So these 5 thought processes are: 1, I door thought process that arises through I door. And then the next one is the mind or thought process. That takes the first visible object as object. And then the third thought process is again mind or thought process that takes the group of visible objects as objects. And then the fourth thought process is the one that through mind or, and that takes the thing concept as object. And the fifth thought process, again through mind or, takes the name concept as object. The four that follow the idea thought processes are called following thought processes or subsequent thought processes. So we need 5 kinds of thought processes to see a thing and to say that I see a thing, or I see a man or a woman or a cup and so on. So this is the process of seeing. So seeing is a very complex experience, and we need thousands and thousands of thought movements before we can say I see a thing. And as you know, that billions of thought movements can arise and disappear in a second or in a fraction of a second, we can understand that during this very brief moment, thousands and thousands of thought moments arise and disappear. Now this is following the thought processes. After understanding the thought processes, we can know, or we can find out how these moments of thought are related to each other, and how they are related to the visible object or the objects they take, and how they are related to the bases they depend on. So you can talk about seeing with regard to the bases, with regard to the doors, and with regard to the objects. And also, if you know Patthana, the 7th book of Abhidhamma, then you can tell the relationships between the first and the previous thought moment and the following thought moments. So you can tell a lot about seeing, which seems to be a very simple experience when you know Abhidhamma. And although when we teach thought process, we use the diagrams like this, please do not understand that they all exist at one time. They exist only one at a time. So although it is like a series of thought moments, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, actually at one moment there is only one citta. That one citta arises and disappears, and in its place another citta arises and so on. So the real occurrence of these thought processes may be shown by having a door in the wall and then run the chart like this. So you see only one type of consciousness at a time through the window. That is to be understood like this. Not that there are, say, these 17 thought movements arising at the same time as we see on the sheet. So these thought movements arise just one at a time, and then after arising and after existing for 3 sub-moments, they disappear. And then they are followed by another type of consciousness or another citta and so on and so on. So this is the process of seeing. So when we see something, our mind goes through these 5 types of thought processes. Not 5 thought processes, but 5 kinds of thought processes. Because the other thought processes may repeat themselves many times. Now this is when we see something. And also a very simple presentation of seeing a thought process. Sometimes the object we see may be variegated, very complicated designs and paintings and so on. In that case, we need more thought processes to see the object and to know the object. So you can imagine how complex this seeing is. And when you hear a sound, your mind goes through more or less the same type of thought processes. Suppose you hear a sound, one syllable sound. Let's say just man. So when you hear the sound, that means the sound comes into the avenue of your ear and then strikes at your ear and at the same time strikes at the bhavangas. And then one bhavanga passed and then second bhavanga vibrates and then third bhavanga, at the third bhavanga ceases. And then turning towards the object, turning towards the sound in this case, and then hearing consciousness or ear consciousness, and then receiving, investigating, determining, and then javanas and registration are the same. So first you hear the sound like that. You hear the sound with ear door thought process. The sound immediately disappears. So the next thought process is through mind door, or the next thought process is mind door thought process that takes the sound that is just passed as object. After that thought process, another thought process arises again through mind door, taking the sound man or taking the name man. After taking the name man, the next thought process is knowing the man. So in hearing thought process, the thing concept or the taking of thing concept and name concept are changed. In the seeing thought process, the taking the thing concept comes first and then taking the name concept. But in hearing thought process, first you hear something and then you know the meaning of it. So first you take the name concept, and from that name concept you know the thing concept, and that will come only when you know the meaning of it. If you do not know the meaning of the sound, that last thought process will not arise. Like when we hear foreign languages that are not our language and we don't know anything. So in that case, the last thought process will not arise. So this is the sequence of thought processes when we hear something. So there are only 4 here. First, we hear the sound which is present. And the next, we take the past sound as object. That is the second type of thought process. And then with the third type of thought process, we take the name concept. Now we know the sound man. And then with the fourth thought process, we take the thing concept, the man that is represented by the word man. So we need 4 types of thought processes to hear one syllable sound. But if there are 2 syllables, then we may need one more thought process to hear the second syllable. Let's say woman. Now, there are 2 syllables in the word woman. So we first hear the sound wu, and then we hear the sound man. So for the sound wu, there is one thought process, and for the sound man, there is another thought process, and then the combination of these 2, women, another thought process. So the more there are syllables, the more thought processes there are. If it is a long word, like meditation, say there are how many meditation? 4 syllables. So you have to hear each syllable first, and then you combine all 4 syllables, and as a whole you take them. So the more there are syllables, the more complex the sequence of thought processes is. So we are hearing every day, we are hearing the talk, but this process is also very complex, and it is amazing that our mind can run this fast. The thousands of maybe billions of thought processes going on in your mind when you are listening to my talk now. So this is the sequence of thought processes when we see, when we hear, when we smell, and so on. And so now we know the complexity of these seemingly simple experiences. So when we know this through Abhidhamma, we know more about ourselves. We know more about our seeing, our hearing, and so on. And so our understanding of ourselves becomes deeper with the knowledge of Abhidhamma. If you don't know Abhidhamma, it's okay, you are seeing things and you are hearing words, then there is no harm in that. But when you know Abhidhamma, then your understanding deepens. You know more about the hearing process, seeing process, and so on. This is one benefit we get from the knowledge of Abhidhamma. Now, in the mind or thought process, it is said that there is no past bhavanga. So there, in the mind or thought process, there will be no number 1. So it will begin with vibrational bhavanga and so on. And also there will be no receiving, investigating, determining. Oh, you have that one? Okay. So you may look at just the first one. Now there this is the present rupa objects. So when these are present rupa objects, then there is the past bhavanga. But when it is the past, then there is no A or Atita bhavanga. So these all have a Atita bhavanga. But there are other types of mind or thought processes, but we do not have the transparencies of them. So when the past objects are taken, then there is no past bhavanga. So we begin with vibrational bhavanga and arrest bhavanga. And also receiving, investigating, these two, receiving and investigating, do not arise in mind or thought processes. Now this is just a taste of thought processes, and so next time I will explain these thought processes in more detail than this. So when we see something, our mind has to go through 5 types of thought processes, and when we hear something, it has to go through 4 types of thought processes. But depending on the number of syllables, number of thought processes may be great. And the other thought process I want you to know is the path thought process. That means when a person reaches enlightenment. Now, people talk about enlightenment, but I wonder whether they really understand what enlightenment is. And enlightenment may be different for different people. I mean, you ask a Christian and he will give one answer, and you ask a Buddhist and he will give another answer. So enlightenment may be different to persons of different religion. But this enlightenment is according to the teachings of Theravada Buddhism. So enlightenment arises when path consciousness arises. So what we call enlightenment is really that path consciousness. Now path consciousness arises in one thought process, and that thought process is not through 5 sense doors, it is through mind door, because you practice meditation, and when you practice meditation, the thought processes are mostly mind door thought processes. And when a yogi practices vipassana meditation, and he goes through different stages of vipassana knowledge one by one, and when his vipassana become mature, then there will come a time when a type of consciousness arises in his mind. And that type of consciousness is a very new one. He has not experienced that type of consciousness before in his life, in this life or in past lives. So the thought process goes something like this. Now there are bhavangas, and then C is vibrating bhavanga, and U is upacheda or arrested bhavanga. So 2 bhavanga movements, and then bhavanga will stop. After the bhavanga, since it is the mind or thought process, there is no 5 sense door adverting. Instead, there is mind door adverting. So M is mind door adverting. And after that, there are some names, strange names, Parikama, Upachara, Anuloma, and Gotarabu. Now these are actually Kusala Kama Vajra Chetas. They belong to the sense sphere, wholesome consciousness. So the English is correct, wholesome sense sphere Chetas. And these wholesome sense sphere Chetas arise as here Parikama, preliminary or preparation, and then approximation, and then adaptation, and then Gotrabu. So these 4 thought movements belong to wholesome sense sphere Chetas. So these 4 thought Chetas arise and disappear. Now Parikama means preparation. It's a preparation for the Magga or path consciousness to arise, and then it approaches or it gets into the vicinity of Magga, and so the next one is called Upachara, neighborhood or approximation. And the third is called adaptation. It conforms to both the preceding and succeeding thought movements. And after that, there is a G, Gotrabu, sublimation or change of lineage. Until this moment, the person is a worldling, Putujana. After this moment comes Magga, path consciousness. as soon as path consciousness arises, the person ceases to be a putojana and he becomes an Arya or noble person or an enlightened person. So he becomes enlightened person at the moment of Magga or path. And that moment of path is immediately followed by here 2 moments of phala or fruition. Sometimes there may be 3 phala moments, sometimes there are 2. So after 2 phala moments, the thought process ceases and then bhavangas take on. So this is a thought process of path and fruition, or it is the thought process of enlightenment. So when a person gains enlightenment through the practice of vipassana, this thought process arises in his mind. And as you know, the bhavanga moments take kama or kama nimitta or gati nimitta as object. They never change their objects. But beginning with manodvara vajana, beginning with the M, they take what are called miscellaneous formations. Miscellaneous formations means mind and matter that are conditioned. When you practice vipassana meditation, you take the mind or matter that is conditioned. So these are technically called miscellaneous formations. Sometimes your object is matter like rising and falling of the abdomen or breathing in and breathing out. Sometimes the object is your mind, your wandering mind, or the cetasikas that arise in your mind like lobha, dosa and others. So these are called miscellaneous formations and they are object of vipassana. So a person practices vipassana and now his vipassana is about to come to an end. And so all through vipassana, what he takes as object is the miscellaneous formations. In other words, conditioned phenomena or mind and matter that are conditioned. After anuloma, after adaptation, arises gotrabhu or change of lineage. Now this gotrabhu belongs to wholesome sense sphere chetas. So one of the wholesome sense sphere chetas. But the difference between gotrabhu and the preceding thought movements is that while the preceding thought movements take miscellaneous formations as object, gotrabhu takes nibbana as object. And from this moment, the lineage of that person is changed. That means from being a putojana or worldling, he is now going to become an Arya or an enlightened person. If it is the first attainment of enlightenment, then we can say he is going to become a Sotapanna. So after gotrabhu, Magga consciousness arises. Now Magga belongs to supramundane consciousness. So the Magga is supramundane consciousness and the preceding chetas belong to wholesome sense sphere consciousness. So they are different. Now at the moment of Magga, what happens? along with the path consciousness, there arise how many Cetasikas? 36 Cetasikas. So among these 36 Cetasikas, there are right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, the 8 factors of path. So when we say the Noble Eightfold Path or 8 factors of path, we mean these 8 factors arising at this moment of path consciousness or arising together with path consciousness. They are the real path factors. Before that, when a person is practicing meditation and the manodvara, vajana, parikama and so on are arising, they take the miscellaneous formations as object. Now Gotrabu takes the Nibbana as object. So Magga, at this moment, the 8 factors arise, right? So with the Parikama, Upajara, Anuloma, also these 8 factors arise. And these 8 factors are called path factors, but they belong to mundane sphere. They are not supramundane, they are not real path factors, but still they are called path factors because they resemble the real path factors. So when we are practicing vipassana meditation, these 8 factors are functioning. Now, right effort. If you do not make effort, you cannot be mindful. So when you try to be mindful, when you pay attention to the objects, there is this right effort. And through right effort, there is right mindfulness. And through right mindfulness, there is right concentration. And when mind becomes concentrated, then it penetrates into the nature of things, or it sees the 3 characteristics of conditioned phenomena. And the 3 factors of right speech, right action, right livelihood are said to be already accomplished. Although, strictly speaking, they do not arise during the moments of vipassana, since a person has purified his moral conduct by taking precepts, these 3 factors of right speech, right action and right livelihood are said to be accomplished. So when a person, a yogi, is practicing vipassana meditation, he is practicing these 8 path factors. But the 8 path factors he is practicing belong to mundane sphere. But these same 8 factors, when they arise with Magga, become the real path factors. So among these 8 path factors, there is right understanding. Right understanding is Panya. So this path consciousness is able to destroy mental defilements. So destruction of mental defilements occur at the moment of Magga or path consciousness. And here destruction is absolute, once and for all. Defilements that are destroyed by Magga will not arise in that person again anymore. This is the absolute destruction. Now we can abandon mental defilements momentarily or temporarily by practice of vipassana meditation and by practice of jhanas. But just by vipassana and just by jhana, we cannot abandon these mental defilements altogether. It is only at the moment of magga or enlightenment that these mental defilements can be destroyed altogether, so that they do not appear again. So at the moment of magga or path consciousness, defilements are destroyed. And immediately after magga followed 2 moments of fruition. And the function of these 2 or 3 here 2 moments of fruition is further tranquilization of defilements. That means defilements have been destroyed by magga. And when phala moments come, they further tranquilize the defilements so that they cannot burn again, or they cannot arise again. So the phala moments do not destroy any defilements, but they keep the destroyed defilements subdued during the moments of their arising. So although magga and phala belong to supramundane level, magga is the one that destroys the mental defilements, and phala or fruition is the one that tranquilizes further the defilements, or that subdued further the defilements. Now magga is compared to putting out the fire, and phala is compared to pouring more waters on the already extinguished fire so that it cannot burn again. Now after the phala moments, the thought process ceases, and so the bhavanga moments take on. So this is the thought process at the moment of enlightenment. And you know there are 4 maggas, Sotapatti magga, Sakadagami magga, and so on. And so at different levels, the different mental defilements are destroyed. Now, I think you are familiar with the qualities of the Sangha. Supatipanno, Bhagavato, Savaka, Sangho, and so on. So in that formula, there are words that say there are 4 pairs of men and 8 individuals. Now you read the second verse. Those 8 individuals praised by the virtuous, they constitute 4 pairs. They, the worthy of offerings, the disciples of the welcome one. To these, gifts given yield abundant fruit. Verily in the Sangha is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be happiness. Do you know where this verse is from? Ratana Sutta. Very good. So in the Ratana Sutta is a sutta that we recite to make asseverations. That means to say some of the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and then in the end we say, by this truth, that means by this saying of truth, may there be happiness. So Ratana Sutta is the real sutta to recite. But the other suttas, Metta Sutta is more to practice than to recite. If you know the meaning and recite Metta Sutta, it can be said that you practice metta, but metta sutta is not just to recite, but to practice. But Ratana Sutta is for recitation. So when you recite Ratana Sutta, you make this asseveration of truth by saying, by this truth may there be happiness, by this truth may there be happiness, and so on. Now, the 8 individuals and the 4 pairs, now these are the noble disciples of the Buddha, and they are called in Pali Ariya Puggala. And it is said that there are 8 such individuals, 8 kinds of noble persons. Now how do we get 8, and how do we get the 4 pairs? The 4 pairs, a person at the moment of Sotapatti Magga is one person, and the same person at the moment of Phala and so on is a Phala person. So at one stage there are 2 persons, the one who is at the moment of Magga and also the one who is moment of Phala. One and the same person is called 2 persons here, made into 2 persons. That we must understand. So at the moment of Magga, he is Magga person, and at the moment of Phala and so on, he is a Phala person. But he is just one and the same person. Actually, it would be very difficult to see a Magga person, because we do not know when he is going to get enlightenment, and that enlightenment, the moment is just a billionth of a second, and so in practice it is very difficult to see or to meet a Magga person. But the person at the moment of Magga is called, let us say, Magga person, and the person at the moment of Phala and so on until he reaches the next stage is called a Phala person. So Sotapatti Magga person and Sotapatti Phala person, there are 2, and they are called pairs. And then the second stage, Sakadagami. So Sakadagami Magga person and Sakadagami Phala person. Sakadagami means once returner. And then the third stage, Anagami Magga person and Anagami Phala person. Non-returner Magga person and non-returner Phala person. And then Arahant. Arahant Magga person and Arahant Phala person. So there are 4 pairs and 8 individuals. If you do not know this thought process, or if you do not know Abhidhamma, it would be very difficult to understand the 8 individuals and 4 pairs. And if you do not understand Abhidhamma, you may misunderstand this, the 8 individuals and 4 pairs. Now, there are some people who say Magga and Phala may arise at different times, or Magga may not necessarily be immediately followed by Phala, because they point out that there are 8 persons, say Magga person and Phala person. So say the Magga person means one who has got Magga only, and then later at some time, say he will get the fruit of Phala, and then he will become a Phala person. So they say that Magga can arise separately from being immediately followed by Phala. But that is not true. You see this thought process, and this thought process goes uninterrupted So Magga must always or immediately be followed by Phala. But one and the same person may be called a Magga person at the moment of Magga and Phala person at the moment of Phala, and so on. I gave the analogy of a person who is breaking a record. So when, say, athlete, so when he breaks the ribbon, the moment he breaks the ribbon, then he is breaking a record. One moment after that, he is the one who has broken the record. So we can see two persons there. The one actually breaking the record and the other, but the same person who has broken the record. So we can see two persons in just one person, depending on at what time we call him. So in the same way, here also, the yogi is like a man who is running. Now his mind is going very swift. So at the moment of Magga, he is a Magga person, and at the moment of Phala, he is a Phala person. But he is one and the same person. So that this we understand only when we know this thought process. And also, to go back to what I said before, one of the attributes of the Dhamma is akaliko, no time, right? So no time means no intervening time in giving results. So here Magga is the cause and Phala is the result. So in this thought process, the result immediately follows the cause. There is no time gap between Magga and Phala. So Magga is said to be akalika, no time in giving results. So when we say Dhamma is akalika, Dhamma gives immediate results, we mean by Dhamma this Magga, the four Maggas. As you know, there are 10 kinds of Dhammas. 4 Maggas, 4 Phalas, Nibbana, and the scriptures. So when we say Dhamma is akalika, we mean Magga, 4 Maggas only, and not Phala, not Nibbana, and not scriptures. That is one thing we must understand, or we understand through the knowledge of the thought process. Now the other one is the same thing, the other verse. That sanctity praised by the Buddha Supreme is described as concentration with immediate result. There is none like that concentration. Verily in the Dhamma is this precious jewel. By this truth may there be happiness. Again from Ratana Sutta. So here it is that that sanctity or purity praised by the Buddha Supreme is described as concentration with immediate result. Now here concentration is mentioned. Now with Magga Citta there arises Samma Samadhi, right concentration. So that right concentration is described here as concentration with immediate result. That means concentration that gives results without being intervened by any time. And there is none like that concentration. Now Magga concentration is called the best. There are jhana concentration, but jhana concentration can keep the mental defilements away temporarily, not absolute. So the Magga concentration is the best of the concentration, so it is said there is none like that concentration. So we understand that verse in Ratana Sutta when we understand the path thought process taught in Abhidhamma. So even the Sutta passages you can understand fully only when you understand Abhidhamma. But I don't mean every Sutta passage. But there are passages like this where you need a knowledge of Abhidhamma to understand properly. Let's have a break.